Aloha, I'm Dr. Mark Willman, PhD in Agricultural Sciences.
And I'm Dr. Valerie Willman. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist here on the island doing Christian counseling.
Today we're going to give you our marriage testimony. We're going to tell you about the many worldly influences that we allowed in our lives that sucked the life out of our marriage. And then we're going to tell you about putting our relationship into the hands of the God who made us. And using His principles, God resurrected and healed our marriage. He gave us ways to connect and to flourish throughout our lives together. This is going to be divided into two videos. The first video is called The Mess. And we're going to talk about the mess right now.
I'm going to start by telling you a little bit more about the foundation of that mess. And I would suggest that our foundation was truly on the world. Worldly ways were our focus and the way we were kind of brought up to focus on and pursue success in education, in our careers, and in achieving our goals. In fact, we met at Purdue University at a graduate level class. Mark had already obtained his PhD and he was doing a postdoc there at Purdue, and I was finishing up my PhD. Still achievement oriented, still trying to prepare for really good careers, we fell in love. And the emphasis there is on feel good. We fell in love. We thought that feelings and how we felt individually was really the main point of a relationship. And so our emphasis was not on God. It actually was on ourselves. Even after we got married, even after we got married, got into marriage, it was on ourselves. And we got good jobs. We ended up getting good careers. But our focus was never on pouring into and developing the marriage and the relationship between the two of us.
Another factor that played in us breaking our marriage was that we were not honest with each other. Early on in my life, I learned to stuff feelings, and that carried on into my marriage. And so we were not honest with each other about our fears, our worries, our anxieties, our hopes, and our desires, especially those that we thought might upset each other or hurt each other. And so because we weren't honest with each other, we didn't pray with each other, we didn't share the deep, dark stuff with each other that would draw us closer together.
Truth is that we brought tremendous voids into the relationship. And those voids had to do with needs that were unfulfilled. The problem is that we look to the world to fill our voids. And the world has lots of lies for us, lots of seductions that pulls us into that desire to fill the void with something that's not of God. And that's the direction that we ended up going to try to fill those voids.
So because I didn't necessarily share the truth, I had some void in me, and the way I dealt with that void was to smother it. Smother it with career was one way, but smothering it with alcohol was another way. And I would drink and drink to excess to the point of passing out. And then I wouldn't have to deal with the problems that I struggled with inside. Another way I dealt in an unhealthy way was using drugs, whether it was marijuana or other drugs that would just numb the pain that I was experiencing inside and that I wasn't sharing with anybody. And finally, the other thing that I used was lust or pornography or sex with self and others, again, to numb myself, to distract myself, to destroy our marriage.
And for me, I'll tell you about something that may seem just a little bit deceptive, and that is that I used food. I idolized food. I had an eating disorder, and even though I shared that with Mark before we were married, he had no way of understanding what an eating problem would do. Focusing on food instead of focusing on the emotional issues and the connection that we so desperately needed really just pulled me more and more away. Just as alcohol and drugs might have done that for Mark, the food was doing that for me. So I brought that into the marriage, and once we started having trouble, I also pursued another relationship. And that just made more of a mess out of an already terrible situation for us.
So after 4 years of marriage, we had broken our marriage. We had destroyed it, and it came to a head at one point when Val confronted me. She said, "Mark, you're killing yourself, and I don't want to die with you." And at that point, I realized I needed to get help, but it was too late at that point. So we separated. Val moved from Indiana to Oregon, and I stayed in Indiana. And for 2.5 years, we were separated.
In addition to that, before I moved to Oregon from Indiana, I filed for divorce. I still remember the day walking into the Crown Point, Indiana courthouse with the $50. That's how much it cost to file for divorce in those days. And it was interesting, something very exciting happened as I filed for divorce. Although I wasn't excited about it at the time, I was pretty irritated. But I went by this bench where two men sat. They looked like janitors to me. And instead of ignoring me as I went by, they stopped me. And they asked me what I was doing at that courthouse. And I thought to myself, well, none of your business, really. But I decided to go ahead and tell them that I was filing for divorce. And they answered, "No, you really don't want to file for divorce." And I said, "Yes, I really do want to file for divorce." And they said, "No, you really don't want to file for divorce." And we went back and forth like this several times. And finally, I just turned my back and I walked into the office and I filed for divorce and I paid the money and I walked out of the courthouse. Now, the exciting thing about this isn't that, but it has to do with what happened later. We discovered that that divorce never went through. Something supernatural must have happened that day. And we believe that it's possible those two men that look like janitors might have been angels.
Well, that concludes the first part of this two-part video series called The Mess. In our next video series, we're going to talk about the miracle. So stay tuned, and thank you for listening. Aloha.
Aloha.